Hello everybody, and a huge warm welcome back to our global webinar series, Thriving After Massive Global Disruption. I'm Phil Considine and I'm Director of Policy at Strathclyde here at the University of Strathclyde in Glasgow. And we are absolutely delighted today to be hosting a webinar with another truly global feel to it. We're hosting, the webinar today has been led by Professor Ala Al-Din Al-Haloumi from the Middle East University in Jordan, with contributions by Professor Jens de Cree from Dublin City University and Professor Ismail Al-Hinti from the Technical University of Jordan. I'm going to pass over to Ala to introduce the other two speakers in full, but just to give you a bit of a flavour for today's sessions. We will have one session on global participation in research, value creation and supply chains through blockchain-enabled open platforms, so a hugely topical area. We will have one on the transition to online on-demand learning, so for all of us involved in the higher education sector, but far beyond that, something that we are all very quickly coming to terms with as being the new norm. And we will finish off by a session by Professor Ala himself on infectious disease symptoms monitoring and perspectives for printed wearable sensors. So again, massively topical and very much looking forward to the questions that will spin from today's sessions, and also to the information that's being passed on by our expert webinar leaders. So without further ado, can I pass over to Professor Ala, who will introduce properly the contributors and give a little bit more information, both on what will be discussed, but also importantly on the work that's coming out from the Middle East University in Jordan. So if I can pass over to you, Ala, and I'll put myself on mute.
Thank you very much, Phil. I'm delighted to lead today the third session in the series of Thriving After Massive Global Disruption, organized and coordinated by the University of Strathclyde. Our webinar for today will be about the global perspectives, as you said, after the massive global disruption. The speakers of this webinar are Professor Ismail Al-Hinti from Al Hussein Technical University in Jordan, Professor Jens de Cree from Dublin City University, and myself from the Middle East University in Amman, Jordan. As you may know, Middle East University and University of Strathclyde has a strong partnership, and we launched the first joint MFARM program last year. It's called MFARM 3+2, so the students can make 3 years of their studies for the in pharmacy in Jordan, and then continue the last 2 years at Strathclyde. We follow also completely the guidelines of the University of Strathclyde and the working on the module spaces. And we have long strategic plan now to open a new programs, joint and hosted programs. Now, our webinar for today focuses on expert perspectives on multidisciplinary advancements in the post-pandemic era. And as you can see from the topics, it's different topics. And now, the first speaker actually is Professor Ismail Al-Hinti, and he is a passionate educator and entrepreneur, and a recognized expert in energy with 20 years of diverse experience and exceptional track record. Besides his rich academic experience, Professor Al-Hinti is also a renowned expert in the field of energy management, energy auditing, measurement and verification, and renewable energy applications. In 2011, Professor Al-Hinti co-founded the ETAMAX Energy and Environmental Solutions Company, which later became a market leader in the Middle East. As for Professor Jens Dokrier, he is a full professor of microsystems at Dublin City University. He is the founding director of the first Fraunhofer Project Center for Embedded Bioanalytical Systems in Ireland, which is a joint initiative of Science Foundation Ireland and Fraunhofer Gesellschaft. He is also academic member of the National Center for Sensor Research and the 3U Joint Institute of Global Health, and a principal investigator for microfluidic platforms at the Biomedical Diagnostics Institute since 2008. The main part of Professor Dukrie's research is directed towards novel microfluidic systems and associated actuation, detection, fabrication, and instrumentation technologies for the integration, automation, and parallelization of bioanalytical protocols. Recently, Professor Dokrier started activity seeks opportunities for science, research, and technology development in the context of a crypto economy represented by blockchain. Now, we will start with Professor Al-Hinti, who will give perspectives on the transition to online on-demand learning, redefining higher education models in post-pandemic era. Now, the word for you, Professor Ismail.
Okay, thank you, Professor Ala, and thank you for the opportunity to join this panel today. Although, as you have noticed, my background is actually in energy, but today I'm going to talk about a different topic because my capacity now is a Vice President of Al Hussein Technical University. And I hope the presentation is going to be as provocative as possible for the audience, where I'm going to present what we see basically as an opportunity. Sorry. Okay. What we see as an opportunity to redefine basically learning and higher education institutions in the post-pandemic era. E-learning basically is not a new thing. It has been there in different capacities, different methods, and different approaches for the past 30 or even 40 years. But we've seen an evolution of online learning, especially over the past, say, 10 years. But to be frank, online learning was not seen as by higher education institutions as a major or a serious or fundamental mode of delivery by most higher education institutions around the world, until we were all forced basically to reconsider at the time of the pandemic. I'm trying to move the slide. Can you see my slides now?
Yes.
Perfect. So all higher education institutions found themselves moving to a new territory, basically with the lockdowns. Here in Jordan, we had a full, nearly 2-month full lockdown, which on one hand managed to keep the active cases below the limit of 200 cases. for a nation of 10 million inhabitants, which was seen as an achievement, but forced many sectors in the country to rethink their position, especially higher education and education in general, where all universities found themselves having to switch to online learning. And this was a learning experience for everyone. And the challenges were faced by everyone, but with different and varying degrees. At HTU, we found it as an opportunity simply because we are a young university. We're only 3 years old, and our campus is still small but evolving. But we found an opportunity basically in moving very swiftly to online classes and online delivery of our programs. We also opened many courses from Coursera and edX to our students. We launched our own YouTube channel, and all classes took place at the regular times using Microsoft Teams and all that. But this is not really our vision of online learning. I think the proposal now that we are taking, and we all as academics in this field, we need to rethink the model of delivery, and based on the experience that we had over the past few months, and based on the uncertainty in the coming months or year, I think we need to rethink the assumptions that we have on higher education. The model that I think will be sustainable is a model that focuses on online content, and this online content both asynchronous and synchronous, where we have high quality structured online content, and in addition to or blended with live on-campus and off-campus sessions, which focus more on learning activities. This is combined with live on-campus practical sessions and activities, and all moving or shifting the whole process to provide learner-centered, personalized coaching and progress support. I'll just give you some ideas why we think that this is basically the model that is going to survive and that is going to change how we view higher education over the next couple of or few years. I think this model is going to give flexibility to students, where we can basically offer students with unlimited degrees of freedom, where we can accommodate fast trackers or slow pacers. This can basically get us to the point where we rethink the academic calendar, the whole modality and the academic calendar and semesters. I think they might not be as relevant as they are now, or they have been for the past, probably years. This is going to be valued, and this is being valued more and more by students. And I'm going to touch on this later on. It will allow also faculty members and academics to focus on the development of high quality content, where people can collaborate to create high quality content that is shared and that is recorded and accessed by different users, probably in different universities, and the content is developed by different academics and faculty members in probably different universities, but leading to what we call the optimum course in any discipline, and where we can focus on different delivery approaches and creating high quality material. This will allow us to have more time or more free time for the faculty members, and this will allow us to shift the campus or on-campus experience to focus on the practical aspects of the curriculum, to focus on the activity aspects of the curriculum. And this will ensure that we utilize the time of the instructor or the faculty member in the best way, where instructors can play the role of coach for student development and to follow up on the student development and to provide personalized advice and monitoring to students. Again, if this is implemented, this will allow us basically to scale up, not just HTU, but I'm thinking of all universities that are going to adopt this model. Basically, what we will do is that we will decouple the growth in student enrollment from the need to or for more on-campus resources. And this is going to be crucial for certain universities that find themselves limited in resources. They can basically scale up and they can attract more students. And instead of delivering your course to, say, 100 students at a time, you could be delivering your course to, say, 1,000, 10,000, or probably in some cases 100,000 students. Not all of them doing the practical side and doing the activities on campus, but a portion, only just a portion of them. But your material is going to be delivered to a much larger audience. And there you give the freedom to the students basically to select and to adapt or customize their learning experience by the instructors that they wish to continue with. And also this model will allow us to reach out for new segments in the audience or new segments of learners where especially professionals, working professionals who don't really have the time to spend, say, 4 years on campus, full-time basis. I think this will allow more people to get access to higher education. And most importantly, with scalability and reach, this will lead to reducing the cost or the unit cost of education. And this is becoming a burden basically and an issue for students everywhere in Jordan and globally, where education is not subsidized. In Jordan, students have to pay for their education, and this is becoming challenging for most families. So if we can scale up, I think, and focus our resources, I think we can bring down the cost of higher education significantly, and this will make higher education more affordable to a wider community of learners. Continuous improvement is something that is at the heart of online on-demand learning model, where we can have access to a huge amount of data, and with AI and analytical capabilities, basically we can personalize the experience of the learner. We can monitor the progress of learners. We can actually get an insight on what is really happening with the learning experience, where students find it difficult to follow, where students find it enjoyable to continue, what makes students more successful in certain subjects or certain topics than others, and all types of metrics that basically can allow us to continuously improve the learning experience of the learners. And this will help basically in student retention, which is also an issue for most universities around the world. Of course, this is not as rosy as I try to make it. We have to face lots of challenges, lots of questions that we have to answer. And I admit that nobody today has the answer or the correct answer or a recipe for what we are proposing. But these are issues. These are all issues. Our faculty members, the traditional faculty member, is he or she ready for such experience? Faculty members will have some resistance to this, or a lot of resistance in certain cases. Can we offer the support that we offer now on campus through online or virtually or through virtual campus? Can we manage to engage students in the same the same effectiveness that we managed to do so now with live campuses? Completion rates for online courses has been an issue all the time, and I think this is something that we need to address. This is a challenge that we need to address. Assessment, quality assurance are also challenges that we have to come up with solutions for to ensure that the quality of the courses, the quality of the learning process itself is as high as we want it. And after all, will students enjoy this? Will they have something that can compensate for the student experience? Education or higher education or universities are not only about getting or going to courses and getting degrees. It is the whole student experience, on-campus experience. And I think this is something that we can address through activities and transforming the role of the campus in the whole process. And after all, and most importantly, this represents a shift in direction, a total change in direction and mindset. And this is not going to be easy for institutions, especially for well-established institutions, to adopt such change, and it will take a lot of time. And there I see an opportunity for younger universities, younger institutions to adapt to such models. And the next 5-10 years are going to be very interesting. And I think what we are looking at is more or less we're moving from theater to the like of or a model of similar to Netflix of higher education, where students can actually pick courses, can take courses, advance in these courses at their own pace, personalize their learning experience. And of course, people till now go to theater if they wish to do so. But I think what is being offered by On Demand is something that is changing the whole experience. And this is just an example that I like to make basically just to provoke thought. So thank you very much. I hope this was provocative, and I think this is the purpose, or this was my intention basically in this presentation. So, Phil.
Yeah, thanks for that. I have got here, as you can imagine, thank you for that insightful and challenging presentation. I have got here a list of numerous questions, but what I'm going to suggest that we do is if we leave all the questions to the end, because I also think that Professor Ala and Jens will also be able to kind of contribute to some of the questions, the kind of general teaching and learning questions on it. So we'll gather them all up and we'll kind of pick them all up at the end.
Yes, good. Then let us go for the second speaker, Professor Ducrier, who will talk about the global participation in research, value creation and supply chains through blockchain-enabled platform. It's widely recognized that manufacturing value chains encompassing initial design, testing, and optimization and manufacture are critical in transforming new device technologies from ideas into marketable products. Professor Ducrier and his team propose an open platform business model backed by the swiftly emerging Web3 technology, blockchain, to form resilient supply chains which decentralize and democratize the participation in value creation for a better post-pandemic world. Professor Ducrier, glad to hear your talk.
And the opportunity to speak here. Can you see my screen actually?
Yes.
Oh yeah, because I just see my own face on my thing. Okay, so I have a little bit of an odd topic, and in fairness, I got into it just a few years ago, and just wanted to raise your attention to some new principles enabled by the blockchain technology. And I just give you a glimpse. You have the opportunity to ask all the questions. Blockchain is not easy to understand, so usually after my presentations you have more questions than answers, but that's maybe quite attractive right now. So let's look. I'm essentially looking at a general new approach towards research, and I just schematize this kind of how we do this presently, which I call legacy value creation, right? You do research and technology development to create value, whether it's intellectual value or commercial value or both. So you have an initiator who has an idea, who then creates a proposal for funding or business plan. Usually you need some money to make something happen. Then you receive funding or investment in a company or in a research project. Then you have work packages and deliverables that need to be carried out. For this, you need a team with hands and hopefully a lot of brain, and infrastructure and equipment, depending, of course, on the specific project that you're carrying out. A very important step is you need validation, right? You have like formal procedures, like if you have a new drug, for example, for COVID-19 or so, that needs to go through regulatory approval, CE marking for those who are still in the EU, and so on, you know, so there's safety and compliance issues. And then you want to exploit it, so either as a product, licensing it to somebody, or enhancing your reputation by writing publications as a scientist. So this is kind of a linear kind of value creation that we do when usually that's the concept of what researchers do. In these classical research projects, you might not have noticed, but it has a couple of drawbacks, and I found it very interesting to revisit that in the current global crisis through the pandemic that we're all suffering from. So the focus is mainly on in-house, consortium-based or institutionalized research and technology development teams. So that confines idea generation. There's a lot of smart brains out there who might also have a good idea. You have limited quality and speed of project delivery, so you have a confined workforce essentially and number of brains doing stuff. You sometimes have a lack of credibility due to subjective or biased validation. So if we write a paper in science, for example, some papers that have very high readership probably have a lot of validation, But a lot of papers, you don't really know whether it's all valid, because it's pretty much only internally validated by the authors, and we have to believe the diagrams or data that they present in the paper, but there's no cross-validation. If you go more commercial, there's lengthy negotiations with partners on remuneration, confidentiality, intellectual property, and exploitation, participation in exploitation. That can last years. The bigger the company, the longer it usually lasts. And you're under-leveraging novel global resources and trends. I show you that later. So brains and hands equipped with disruptive technologies, especially in the world of ITC, and also for making things like 3D printing and so on. A lot of things can be done now by individuals that used to require a huge infrastructure. And there's also expensive middlemen, right? Like legal people, banks, and all that take up a lot of money, negotiators and so on, facilitators. And these topics I'm trying to address here. So the new approach is essentially based on crowdsourcing, so involving the global people, brains, pretty much anybody who wants in value creation, also towards the present crisis and the opportunity for raising it. So now you have an idea, of course, you need to start with it. You create a plan, you get funding, RTD, supply chain, so how to manufacture it, how to distribute it, and how to exploit it. And now we want to involve the crowds, and that can be at 2 stages. So for the plan and funding, we can create prediction markets, like essentially like a stock exchange, like betting or so, to assess the idea and then direct funding and improve the plan. We can go to resources. So anybody who has equipment, or if you simulate or so, computational resources, and they're now much more available than before, because you have like supercomputing resources essentially at your fingertips through various cloud-based sources and so on, maker labs, and that can do, so you can have a lot of people in the crowd, in the global crowd, to do stuff and to validate stuff at the same time. Right, so that in certain areas that will leverage new potential. We still need an organization. So you have participants, you need some sort of management that can be also in the crowd or in a company who just wants to outsource. You need workers and suppliers, and you need some investors classically, or there's also new tools in the crowd. So you can incentivize people, not really by a work contract, but by a bounty, right? You can say, I don't care what you do, I don't need your plan, I just want you to deliver something, like a technology, piece of technology or so, and for that you get $10,000, $100,000, that's all set out, I don't want to see any receipts or so, this is it, right? Hackathons are very popular and sort of productive. Citizen science, even with the present pandemic, there's looking for example, new proteins and how they fold in order to find a vaccine or a medication. And crowdfunding, right? So instead of Elon Musk and Warren Buffett, there's a lot of projects already, not even on the blockchain or so, which are kind of crowdfunded, some of them very successful. Somebody has a cool idea, put that out on certain platforms and hopefully gets money. Now, the value creation in the global crisis should maybe revisit how we can democratize and globalize things. So traditionally, you are institutionalized, right? You have huge factories, huge labs, and huge universities. But as an individual, you have very little chance of participating, maybe a little bit consulting or so. But this is changing in the 21st century already. We're getting more decentralized, right? So that concerns people. That concerns, if you will, the ability to make things, for example, with 3D printing or maker labs or fab labs that are available to a much greater extent and are emerging. MIT, for example, pioneered a lot of these concepts. So people can do things and use computers and contribute to value creation pretty much from anywhere on the planet. I give you a brief example that's not fully explanatory what I do, and I give you like some idea about how to involve the crowd. So we are developing so-called microfluidic lab-on-a-chip systems, which essentially detect, for example, the coronavirus or some cancer or some other diseases. And these are looking like a CD player with a little chip of the shape of a CD. and they are processing your blood sample and giving you an answer that's indicated on the device. So for that, you currently need like a manufacturer, which can be done, for example, in a fab lab or maker lab. You need characterization and simulation tools to be part of that value creation. And then you have instruments and players. Nowadays, I started this some decades ago, right? And we needed to have huge access to pretty sophisticated equipment. Now you have the Arduino platform in electronics and so on. So everybody can literally contribute. You can buy a lot of commercial components on Amazon or other platforms. You know, you have a huge selection of stuff you can just buy for comparatively little money, and firmware you can program with little kits. You can assay, so that's a biological test essentially. You can buy commercial kits that you just then port from the traditional way how they are processed in a bioanalytical lab to your own lab. Of course, health and safety needs to be assured, but there is some stuff that is less risky. And you can access biosamples. For example, you can buy calibrants and so on that help you. And you would just, in the crowdsourcing, of course, you don't have to do everything. You could do one particular task that you feel that you are able to carry out through your competence, through access, through these novel ways how to access these technologies. Of course, what I'm showing here is not suitable for all type of RTD projects. Some use like big equipment, whatever the CERN accelerator to find new fundamental particles. You might do something on simulation side, on data evaluation, but on the hardware side it would be difficult to have that in the basement or your garage. Now, in our case, so we can crowdsource essentially the test, which the biologists call the assay. So how to detect, for example, the coronavirus. Then you make a fluidic design, which kind of automates this at the so-called point of care, right? So if you give this, this device that looks like a CD player to people, you cannot expect them to be professionals on handling liquids, on handling blood and so on. It needs to be as simple as, for example, a test for blood glucose or pregnancy from the user point of view. So that is done by what we call microfluidics, moving liquids around and preparing them, extracting the plasma so it's all ready for detection later on. The device manufacturer, the fluidic testing, optimization of the assay, so the test and the instrument and the product. These are the steps essentially for that particular example. It's of course different. So you can create, for example, an open platform if you want to develop this for fluidic design people. That's what I'm currently doing. I'm outsourcing to people that are just, I never met really, who are doing some simulations, how the liquids move on my little plastic chip, essentially. Device manufacturer, as I said, people can buy this equipment for reasonable money and then do the testing of the things. They 3D print, for example, a chip, and then they just test them with running certain fluids. And you can still have, if you want, like a proprietary environment for the assay. Somebody might have that, want to make a business out of whatever, having a particular assay. They don't have the competence to do the fluidic chip, and that can then be outsourced to the crowd. For that, you need some direction. Otherwise, you have a wild zoo of taking place. So you need to direct the crowd by creating a white book. This is essentially defining standards, interfaces, and procedures. So they have a little bit of a guideline, what needs to be done and what has been done and so on. So that's kind of like a white book. That's quite common in industry. Then they need software for design, simulation, and data. I'm providing that, for example, for my particular example. And a fab lab-based prototyping and manufacture. So you might buy a 3D printer or have access in these kind of common labs. There are almost like libraries nowadays where you can just buy for very little money or even for free certain time on certain equipment in these publicly available labs. Test and development kits if you get into the testing of real-world samples, and validation tools. Right, so all that is provided to the crowd. Somebody can pick the particular task they want to commit to, and then whatever, either have it or purchase or get access to equipment, whether software, whether it's hardware, and carry out these tasks. A fundamental problem, if you don't have an organization, if you don't have employees who have a contract of employment with you, is trust, and that's bilateral. Right. So on the one hand, you want to make, so you want to make sure if you are paying people that they are doing something that's useful for you. So not doing some random development, but develop what you want. And on the other hand, these people, which are in the crowd, so you might not even know them or never have met them, they want to know they get reimbursed. You know, that's the principle of economies, right? So one thing is, how do we organize the project? And for the blockchain-based approach, which I explain in the next couple of slides, we have developed a concept of competitive parallelization of work. It's a little bit similar to a market economy, right? So you define what you want by so-called key performance indicators, KPIs, ideally quantitative ones. So you say what you want, you post it on a platform. There's a couple of platforms available as we speak, right? And you get offers from a pool of players. So somebody in the crowd will be like a player. You select this, and you might either select yourself and then have certain reward mechanisms. So you might do staking. So either the one requesting the work can already give a little premium for people submitting an offer in terms of real currency or reputation. That's also a mechanism available on the blockchain, or rewarding in this. So it's kind of the one who offers can say, I bet that I do a good job. If I don't do, the money I put at stake is lost. Otherwise, it can be rewarded. These mechanisms, I don't have the time to get into that, all exist already, right? This doesn't have to be made. Then the players that you select, so a subset of those who send in offers, they deliver the project. So this is the outcome. You might put that could be staked or rewarded by the workers or the requester, the contractor. And then you have a validation, because you don't know, like somebody sends you a couple of results as a file, you know, and how do you know it's not all fabricated, it's all fake, right? Because they're not doing that in your lab. They might be at the other end of the globe. So you want to cross-validate that, so the same players would just look at the work of others that worked on the same topic, or you have a new set of independent players who specialize on validation, on showing that or proving that the results are real. That can be rewarded. And then you can establish a ranking, right? Saying, okay, the best 3 projects are going to be rewarded according to the validation procedure. And then, of course, those who get top ranked, who performed the best 1, 2, or 3, you can describe that, how you reward it in upfront in a contract. So this is the way how you can kind of get truth and trust in from the side that you want to receive good results if you are the one paying. But of course, it's also about those who are on the blockchain don't want to be tricked, right? So I get their results and just say it's all crap while I'm using it. So there needs to be something like a financial accounting, which is always part of the economy, and their blockchain really kicks in as a matter of trust. Right? So the blockchain, some of you might not ever have heard about it. Some of them are experts. So just in a nutshell here, it's a so-called distributed ledger technology. So a ledger, so an accounting sheet essentially, is spread all over the globe with thousands or even millions of nodes, depending on which blockchain you're using. Right? That's a global network, and each one of them has it. So it's very hard to forge it. Also because it's cryptographically secured. Right, so there's a cryptographic puzzle you have to solve in order to participate in extending this blockchain, so this ledger. It's practically unforgeable, not even the CIA could essentially corrupt it. It's time-stamped, so it's very clear who kind of filed something at a certain time. So filed the delivery of work and transferred, for example, a certain amount of money. And it's immutable, so nobody can switch it off, even a big power failure, unless it's on the entire globe, could switch it off, and then you even can switch on the computers again and get it up and running. It's part of what you call crypto economy, and I can only touch here. So most of you probably have heard of Bitcoin, but there's actually thousands of currencies that you can transact on specific blockchains. You can even create your own currency in a couple of minutes, right? You have so-called smart contracts and oracles. Right? So instead of negotiating with people, you can say from the very beginning, let's say there's a bounty, right, for delivering this. If under these and these conditions, when, for example, the outcomes from the workers are validated by independent validators, assessors, right, then automatically a certain amount of money is issued to those who have delivered that work successfully. You have transaction without a middleman, so these currencies are global, right? I could transmit now 1 million or 1 billion Bitcoin or other cryptocurrencies, and nobody would charge a fee or it passes boundaries. So globalization is very nice. You can, as I said, you can print essentially money, and if you're successful, then people accept that money, use it as a currency, for example, Bitcoin, or there's Ethereum, for example, and 1,000 others. If you're not lucky, nobody likes it and it's worth nothing. If people like it, then it can make you very rich, or can just go into the project itself and fund the project. And that's a very new way of funding that would, for example, bypass funding agencies. So-called token economies, I don't want to go into too much detail on that. You have, for example, can build up reputation that is also a currency that is securely stored on the blockchain. And so-called, you can, even if you don't want to have a company, you can have so-called decentralized autonomous organizations that are run essentially just by code, right? And there have been projects like that where millions, if not billions, have already been invested in so-called decentralized apps. I cannot get into all the detail. So the blockchain-enabled crowdsourcing, what are the benefits? It's a highly efficient delivery of research technology development project requiring like a multidisciplinary expertise and a wide range of technical resources. For assembly enhancing quality, speed, credibility, flexibility, cost and risk base, and knowledge management, and tapping into global resources. So it's crypto economy incentivized, so you can receive cryptocurrencies or stable coins, which is the equivalent of dollars or euros or Swiss francs or whatever you want, or yen, and to involve then brains, competences and skills, as well as infrastructure that might be idle or equipment for contributing work, ideas, resources to validate and arbitrate, administrate and make contracts and marketing and say in a completely new way. And it's a long story. I can just scratch it here at the surface to a lean core team. So you can still run that as a company, but you can reward others and let them participate in the value creation. There's a lot of synergies with disruptive technologies. Evidently, I mentioned a few: digital manufacturing, 3D printing, AI, Internet of Things, big data, cloud-based IT resources, crowdsourcing, crowdfunding. And after global disruption, you know, there's a lot of trends in decentralizing certain supply chains, repatriation. You know, in Europe, we ran out of masks, essentially protective equipment and so on, you know, and that will also apply to other industries in the new era of globalization. The democratization of value creation. So for example, anybody on this planet who is so far excluded from traditional value creation, if they have a computer, a little maker lab and so on, they can make their money on this and to the benefit of either side. And also in the future of work, a lot of us are working in home offices. We had the previous presentation, students are attending from home. And of course, a lot of people want to work part-time. So that could involve them in a very quick and uncomplicated way. So in summary, there's always opportunity in crisis. I think in some languages, even the word crisis means kind of like opportunity, or is associated with opportunity. So the global crowdsourcing for complex RTD project by novel blockchain-based platform, blockchain has been around for more than 10 years, but this might be like a trigger to bring it to a new level. The main issue is trust at the real world interface. So within the financial industry, blockchain is already commonplace, right? All big banks and consultancies and so on are doing that. Big software firms like SAP, IBM and so on. They have very strong initiatives, but it hasn't really arrived in the public because a lot of things we want to see happen in the real world cannot be solved. We introduced the crypto economically incentivized competitive parallelization of research and technology, as well as their validation through best-in-class global crowdsourcing. I showed you that diagram to address this issue. I hinted a little bit at specific enablers provided by blockchain, which are reward schemes through cryptocurrency, smart contracts, staking, betting, reputation schemes, as well as synergies with the previously shown disruptive technologies. the big challenge and the opportunity right now in the global restructuring of economies is that so far the outreach has been quite poor. Except for Bitcoin and a few other things, mostly in financial things, blockchain hasn't really arrived. Most people are not even aware of it, and even less of the huge benefits that this can bring. And maybe this could prompt, a new era where this plays a role. Okay, I thank you very much for your kind attention.
Thank you very much, Jens. Very interesting topics for today. We believe that opportunities come out of this challenge, and it opens windows for secure research and development. Thank you very much. So I think to save some time, we will go for my next presentation. If you can stop sharing, please. Thank you, Jens. So, good afternoon, everybody. I hope that you can see my presentation now. Okay. So first of all, I'd like to introduce the Middle East University, which was established in 2005 for graduate studies, then in 2008 for for bachelor programs. The Middle East University has actually 9 faculties in different fields: engineering, pharmacy, arts and science, business, IT, law, educational sciences. And we recently focused also on establishing centers in innovation and entrepreneurship. We have hosted and joint programs with the UK, with the University of Strathclyde, as I mentioned before. We are aware of the quality assurance, so we have the golden level of quality assurance in Jordan. So we are an accredited institution, and recently we received the we were entered the Times University Impact Rankings, the QS rating. So we are working hard toward internationalization, collaboration, partnerships, and focusing on diversing our programs and focus on research and development. So one of my research fields is microfluidics, but I'm going to talk today about wearable sensors, which is the second line of research in my lab. As you can see, in the last few months, we suffered from the COVID-19, this pandemic. And in general, infectious diseases have been categorized by the World Health Organization as a cause of death, the top 10 causes of death worldwide. This kind of infectious diseases has modes of transition. It can be directly transferred or indirectly. By direct contact, as you can see here, it can be done through infected persons by touching, hand shaking, or the second method is by droplets that spread in the respiratory droplets from coughing, for example. For the airborne, is when infectious agents remain suspended in the air, like the measles. There is another indirect method now, is the contaminated objects, food or water, where these contaminated objects is contacting a contaminated viruses, for example, or bacteria. And now the vector-borne, we mean here also an indirect mode of transmission, which is like the transfer of the viruses or the bacteria through the insects. As you can see here in the list, there are many types of epidemic and public health emergencies. These are just examples like the Ebola, the MERS, the SARS, the Rift Valley fever, and lastly is the COVID-19, which was recently added to the WHO priority list. Now, if you look here in this table, we just made a summary table for the infectious diseases, the case fatality rate, the primary modes of transmission, the symptoms, and the monitoring vital signs. As you can see here for the COVID, Ebola, the MERS, the Nipah, that most of symptoms are similar. So the fever, the cough, the headache, the fatigue, the muscle pain, and it's normally in the hospitals to monitor 4 out of the 5 parameters. For example, the respiratory rate, the heart rate, the RR is the respiratory rate, the HR is the heart rate, the BT is the body temperature, the SpO2, and the blood pressure. So for that, we need to prepare devices that's accurate and can give solutions to monitor or surveillance these pandemic diseases. As you can see here, these infectious diseases have similar now symptoms, but at least we can monitor, for example, quarantined people by monitoring their vital signs. The infectious diseases can be divided into 3 types. As you can see, the Ebola, as we said, the severe respiratory diseases that includes disorders in the respiratory system like COVID-19, the MERS, and the SARS, the encephalitis, which includes the brain inflammation and urological illness like the Nipah virus disease. As I said, we need to monitor now the symptoms. Some of the patients develop mild symptoms and may not require hospitalization, but this doesn't exclude them from the possibility of deterioration. So for engineering, we need to develop effective personal protection equipment, develop sensors for wireless vital signs monitoring, analyze the sensors readings to detect certain anomalies and illness state by means of, for example, machine learning, AI solutions, signal processing, and develop novel medical equipment for such testing devices. I think one of the most hot topics and very important line of research in the meantime is the wearable sensors. And as you can see, this is an example here about the wearable sensor, which is directly attached to the skin to measure certain parameters. This type of sensor is a smart and automated, flexible wound dressing with temperature and pH sensors integrated into the flexible bands that monitor the wound status in real time. So here, in addition, you have a drug releasing system comprising a hydrogel loaded with thermoresponsive drug carriers and an electronically controlled flexible heater, which is also integrated onto the wound dressing to release the drugs on demand. This is from Harvard Medical School, Tufts, to MIT and others. And as I said, this is a very hot topic in the meantime. And multiple research groups and companies are aware of this to measure different vital signs. And most of these research are in the development stage. Another example actually is, you can see here, proposed by the University of Texas at Austin. They proposed a new fabrication method for the wearable sensors. By cutting thin sheets of metal or any conductive material on temporary tape, they can be pasted on human skin, and its name is cut and paste method. So it's a method of cut and paste. So for flexible methods, you can use a tape. You can, in my case, I'm using the PDMS, the polydimethylsiloxane, or you can have other methods or materials like rubber or flexible or stretchable substrates. So for printed wearable sensor, the advantages are the low fabrication cost. They are relatively easy to produce. There are also established methods to fabricate and print such devices. It's attractive, flexible, and a hot topic for getting funding. In my research group, we are using two means of fabrication methods, the inkjet printing and screen printing. What you can see here is the pulse oximeter wearable sensors that we developed in our group. We are using the inkjet printing, as I said, the Dymatics Fujifilm machine, which depends on a piezoelectric actuator that deflects to deposit a drop. And this is what's called in the inkjet printing of, for example, here conducting materials. It can be used for other also materials. It can print antibodies. It can print semiconductor liquids. And this method is known as drop on demand. The second method is the screen printing. And here just an example of the fabrication method. You have the screen or the mesh. You have the paste, the squeegee, and you can you have the master, and you can move the squeegee onto paste and fill the paste into the mesh to transfer it down into the substrate and make the protrusions or the conducting lines you are looking for. Here just an example on these sensors that has been developed. This sensor consists of interdigitated silver electrodes that are fabricated using inkjet printing technology, where you can see it in part A, printing of silver, and on the right hand side you can see printing carbon film, and this has been done by screen printing. So you have here a hybrid fabrication method that combines the inkjet printing and the screen printing methods. The carbon is basically a resistance temperature detector, and its resistance change depending on the temperature, and we measure the resistance. Here just an example of the results. If you add more heat, this means more resistance. So when finger is placed, the temperature rises and cools down when removed. And on the right hand side, you can see the calibration curve for resistance with temperature, and these readings are ranging from 28 and 50 Celsius. Another example is the printed pulse oximeter biosensor that has been developed, as I said, in my group. It depends. It's an optoelectronic circuit, which is usually used to derive the heart rate as well as the SpO2 from the PPG signal. We are using the transmission mode. So you have two modes, the reflection and the transmission. We are using the transmission mode. The circuit includes two LEDs and a photodiode, and the circuit lines were printed to create a stretchable version of the sensor on PDMS from silver nanoparticles. Here, just the fabrication steps where we printed the silver conducting lines. Then we added the connections to the outside. We then fixed the LEDs and the photodiodes into the substrates using certain embedding techniques. Here are the real shapes, as you can see, where we were measuring the resistance and making sure that the perfusions are conducting. As you can see also here, the shape of the lines is a sinusoidal shape that's optimized for such an application. And here is the connection and the serial monitor of the results that is connected also to an Arduino, very simple Arduino that has been programmed to give the results for the heart rate and for the SpO2. Another project which is supported by the Royal Academy of Engineering in collaboration with Coventry is to make the respiratory rate sensor. And if you see here, the shape of the printed sensor has been changed and optimized to be able to measure the respiratory rate and to make it comfortable when attached to the patients. By stretching the sensor, the resistance is changing. So we measure the change in the resistance and monitor that. And through the RR derivation, the Fourier transform, filtering, we were able to measure the amplitudes and to obtain the respiration frequency. Here, just the results compared to the eHealth sensor, the conventional method. Our results were very successful, very reliable, and we are now optimizing our system for the kids. Another printed blood pressure sensor, as you can see here, is the blood pressure sensor, and this is a very interesting topic, very complicated topic that has been recently published. There are many research on the blood pressure, but still in the early stage. So in conclusion, I can say that infectious diseases poses a great threat to humanity if not contained. So we need to develop surveillance and monitoring devices that are accurate, reliable, and the potential now is to use the already available fabrication techniques with the new technologies like the AI, the machine learning, and improve our signal processing codes to be able to integrate the sensors together. So we are looking for 4 to 5 vital signs, and we need to find a way to make them as an integrated sensor. This is one of the main challenges. As you can see, this is just in summary. You have body temperature, respiratory rate, heart rate, and SpO2, blood pressure. Now, how we can bring these all together and how we can optimize these types of sensors. So at the end, I'd like to thank you, to thank the funding agencies, my collaborators, and the University of Strathclyde to giving us this opportunity to introduce our research. Phil, I'm done.
Fantastic.
Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Thanks a lot for, again, another fantastically insightful presentation. I have got lots and lots and lots of questions. What we'll try and do for kind of all of the participants, we obviously won't have time to get through them all today, but we'll go for kind of one for each of the participants. But I think they're all kind of, I'll keep them as generic as possible, because I think that everybody will be able to give their thoughts on them. And then what we'll do is, after, we will, if you don't mind, we will send you a note of all the other questions to get your thoughts on them, and then we will post them on the website, just so that people that haven't had their questions answered will be able to. So can I start with one that I think everybody will probably have a view on, and it's I guess it relates to the first presentation particularly, but I think it's for everybody working in the sector just now, it's becoming more and more important, which is, can we ever have the same learning experience online that we do face-to-face? And people are picking up on the peer learning that you get within a university. They're picking up on the experience of being part of a student body gives. Can we replicate that face-to-face on the online and in the VLE? And can I start with, obviously with Ismail with that one, since this was your topic?
Sure. I think there will be different roles for the campus experience. Students will still come to campus if they choose to, and if they wish to. But to do other things that other than just sitting in a lecture, basically, to do more activities, and this actually leads to the idea that universities have to think of new models for engaging students through extracurricular activities, through forums that could be virtual for some times, but still I can see a role for the campus. We might be looking at campuses where we have less classrooms but more activity areas and labs and open labs, and this is where I see universities evolving to.
Great, thanks for that. Jens, do you have any kind of thoughts on that with your engineering hat on? You're on mute, Jens.
Yeah, I just didn't.
We're all now getting used to the fact that
I know that I'm involved in a couple of conferences, and you know, there we have that international online thing, and exactly what Ismail said there. You know, there's always the fear you losing this student body, being part of a body, kind of a scientific community, but also from a student perspective and so on. If you don't socialize, you know, if you don't meet people in person, I think an online only is probably just an emergency thing. But there needs to be probably a clever mixture, right, of online and offline, as you very nicely outlined there. And probably the right modus operandi has to be found, right? I mean, there's probably a little bit of a trial and error, what works with also subject specific. So I'm in the School of Physics. There we have a lot of lab modules where you can hardly see that it's all online. You know, you cannot just watch what somebody else is doing. It's different than if you do it yourself, while for social sciences or so, it might be different, you know, but I think the students still need to meet. I mean, we were all students at some stage and benefited from that greatly, also socially for our future networks and so on.
Great, thanks. And Alan, do you have any kind of additional thoughts?
Yes, please. I think I agree with Ismail and James. We need at the end a hybrid system that can involve both. and in the next few years, we should be more aware of the skills of our graduates. So the skills, focusing on skills, can be done in parallel online for certain classes, but for practical classes, for labs, I don't think it's possible to make it online.
Yeah, and I think, I mean, I can comment from the perspective of Strathclyde, where we are, I mean, clearly we're all currently during the crisis having to move to online, but I mean, our view is very much that at the end of this, we will be adopting a blended approach where you end up with the best of the best. And I think in some ways it's an interesting time for us all to be working in the sector, because since the early 20th century, we have relied on that very traditional lectures and seminar, labs, and so I think that there's a kind of mindset in the sector that thinks that's the only way to deliver. And I think one of the positives that's coming out from this is some of the innovations that we're seeing. Ismail, you mentioned Netflix in your presentation. I was at a presentation with one of the US universities about a month ago. In fact, it was just as we went into lockdown, and they were talking about work that they had been doing with Netflix, because what they're trying to do is they're working with some of the Netflix writers to understand how they can get people to binge learn as opposed to just binge watching, which I thought was a nice and an interesting and positive way of viewing how we might work in the new reality. Brilliant.
Totally
thanks
agree,
very much.
Totally agree.
Sorry, I know absolutely.
Yeah, totally agree. I think there is a lot that we can learn in higher education from the media and the likes of Netflix, or even gamification of education.
Yeah.
This is a whole new area where we need as academics to basically explore it in further depth.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And I think that students currently do have a very legitimate question that they ask us, which is that it's now 2020, why are you still teaching us as if it's 1920? So I think it's a challenge for us all. Great stuff. Okay, so just moving on, and this one was aimed, I know that it was aimed at Jens, and they were asking about microchip devices that you think may well be under development for COVID. But I guess it kind of also ties into the opportunities stemming from the current crisis. And so what are there opportunities that you can see, particularly around some of the microchip devices that you were talking about and the crowdfunding processes that you were considering, and the use of kind of blockchain around developments for COVID-19 that you can think of?
Yeah, good point. I mean, like I think one thing you don't have if you work on COVID-19 is a lack of funding, right? I mean, there's an abundance of public, EU or national or charities who fund this. So it's kind of a little bit almost hard to say, well, almost too much, you know, because the problem with these devices is they need to work really reliably, right? And that's a huge effort. So I would say the research you can set up for 1 million, and to make it work, you need a 10 or even 100 million, and to make them at costs and with all the infrastructures, distribution, service, and so on, you know, that's usually big pharma companies who eventually take that into the market. The testing is, again, if you go for the antibodies, right, this is essentially a reagent thing where you need to find stuff that doesn't detect a lot of other stuff at the same time, right? In terms of microfluidic chips, they are there. It's just a matter of how reliable they are and what their cost base is and how much they are essentially amenable to point of care scenarios. Right? Because it's not only the test, it's kind of like, what if somebody does it wrong, right? I mean, you get a little manual, you need to take some blood sample. If that goes wrong, then you have two scenarios that are not very good. Somebody does the test, does it wrong, has maybe the coronavirus, and it says no. So that person, you know, goes out, tells everybody, look, you don't have a problem with me, and then infects, like becoming a super spreader. The other scenario is if you tell a person who doesn't have it that due to wrong handling or malfunctioning of a chip, you know, that he has it, you know, which might have, you know, some severe consequences. But the worst case is, of course, if you tell somebody he doesn't have it, or she, while they have it, you know. So it's mostly the reliability thing, but I personally know a couple of companies developing these chips. They have already chips for other tests, which are essentially, in principle, doing a similar thing like DNA detection or RNA in terms of the virus and antibodies. It's just like, it's often a reliability issue. Right.
Yeah.
And that is very critical in medical stuff. Same with a vaccine or so, even though that's not microchip based. You know, if you have a lot of people to be tested, then a small failure rate can be very fatal on a population scale. Right.
Yeah.
That's essentially. But there are certainly companies they publish it already, or I know it through to person that develop these chips and have been doing so. And the question is whether it has to be microfluidic as a chip, so or you have conventional stuff. You know, it's not always that microfluidics will be kind of the preferred choice.
Yeah, right. No, absolutely. Brilliant. Thanks for that. And just time for one more. And I guess this one's probably kind of more focused towards Professor Alla, your presentation, and it's asking. We've seen across the globe, certainly in the UK, but we've seen it across the globe where there has been a huge outpouring of admiration for frontline workers. And frontline workers have been, it's healthcare workers, but it's not just healthcare workers, it's people who've been working in our stores and shops, it's people who've been emptying our dustbins when they're full, people delivering all sorts of different services. So are there potential areas for development in wearables for specific groups within that? I mean, perhaps for paramedics, for healthcare workers, for our local authority workers? Are there specific areas that you can see for development and research in these groups?
Yeah, thank you for this very important question. We were discussing that before yesterday to define the groups who are our target. So actually, we are talking now about monitoring and surveillance, not about detection. So this just to give first impression that this person should go for testing or hospitalization or not. So for us, quarantined people, for example, can use this type of sensors. We are thinking about also people who are in groups, for example, in schools or campuses, like refugee camps, maybe also people who are in the universities. So we are trying now to find out and classify the groups who can be used or who can benefit from these wearables. But there is a potential for that because the results are very attractive. It's working now for blood temperature, for the RR sensor, for the SpO2, and we hope that we can bring sensors together, not in one sensor, I mean, but they are integrated in a certain way that cannot harm the users, the patients, or the suspected persons. So they have it wearable without any problem with transferring the data to the for example, for his mobile, or to the government who are monitoring this. So I think for now, we are trying that on the quarantined people at home, and we are looking for other groups.
Excellent, brilliant, thank you. That brings us to the end of today's webinar. So first of all, can I say a huge thank you to Professors Ara, Jens and Ismail for what has been another fantastically insightful and challenging. I think some of the points that were raised today are challenging, is to think differently about not only how we are working, but how we will work, and what the impact of this kind of new reality that we're facing is going to be. We'll be back next week. We are back about 30 minutes earlier, but for those of you who have signed up, we will send out email confirmation of the times to you, where we are with the Asian Institute of Technology from Bangkok, and they will be talking about internationalization. We will collect the answers to the questions. I noticed that, Ismail, thanks very much. I noticed you've been answering some of the questions as they've been coming up, so thank you for that. There's one point I would just like to, or one comment I would just like to make that I think reinforces what your entire presentation was about, Ismail. We've got one comment here that's saying that this cycle of webinars is a very good example of the potential of online learning, combination of experts and discussion, interactivity in the topics. So what's very kind of reassuring for us all to see is that actually online learning doesn't just mean databases and sitting at a keyboard typing. It involves multimedia, it involves a huge range of different ways of us engaging, so that there's certainly not just one way of doing it. On behalf of everybody at the University of Strathclyde and at NEU, thank you very much for your attendance today, and we look forward to seeing you all next week.
Thank you.
Enjoy the rest of your day. Thanks.
Bye-bye.
Thank you very much.
Bye.
Thank you.